I just realized that the real world around me in South Korea was so much more interesting than anything I was coming up with that was fiction. And so I started writing there. And who was I then? I was young and fearless and filled with wonder.
That is writer and editor Lavinia Spalding, and she's describing the traveler she was at age 25 when she had just landed in South Korea with a creative writing degree and a thirst to explore the world. Throughout the years since, she has championed other women's travel stories, and today we're going to hear about them. I'm Aislyn Greene, and this is Unpacked by Afar. Lavinia is the editor of the Best Women's Travel Writing Anthology, and its 13th volume just came out. In it, you'll find 27 essays by women from all over the world, and full disclosure before we start, Lavinia is a friend, and this year she put one of my own essays in the book. But I was a fan of her work long before I was in her pages. We sat down to talk about how she builds a volume, what nearly 15 years of reading women's travel stories has taught her, and how she herself has changed as a woman who moves throughout the world. Lavinia, welcome to Unpacked. It's so lovely to see you as always. And we are here to talk about the latest anthology of Best Women's Travel Writing, which is out in the world now. So to start with, will you share with listeners what exactly this series is?
Sure. So it's a series that's been 13 editions. This is volume 13. And it's nonfiction personal essays from around the world by women. This one has 27 in it. So it ranges from, I would say, 26 to 33 or so stories. And some are a little more reported than others, but there's almost always a sort of deep personal journey.
It's really fun to pick it up and just start reading wherever you land. I have been doing that as with my copy.
People keep saying that to me, and I'm like, no.
Oh, really?
It's purposeful.
No. It's like listening to an album, not from beginning to end, but just, okay, well, I will strike that from the record and say that I have read it from beginning to end. Did not do any flipping.
No, please don't, because everyone's doing that. And I think it is fun for them. I mean, maybe it's a little bit like that stumble upon when you travel.
Yeah.
You do it that way instead of having it being planned out.
Well, we'll get to the kind of playlist quality of it, but I wanted to go back to the beginning. So Traveler's Tales is the publisher of this series, and they've been publishing women's travel literature since 1995. Very cool. So when did Best Women's Travel Writing begin, and when did you arrive to it?
It started in 2005. They had put out an anthology in 2004 called The Best Travel Writing, and they recognized that the vast majority of their submissions were coming from women. And they wanted to be able to publish more than they could in that volume. So they decided to dedicate a whole series to it. And so at first, Lucy Macaulay did the first 5 volumes, and then Stephanie Elizondo Grease did one, and then Stephanie wasn't able to edit the next one. And I had published a book with Traveler's Tales about keeping travel journals. And I guess they liked it. And I guess they liked working with me. And so they asked me to edit the next one. And I've been doing it ever since. And now I've edited 7. This is the 7th one.
Well, and I just want to acknowledge the huge amount of work that you put into this, because as I discovered this year, this is largely you. You do everything. Will you tell me how it comes together start to finish, beginning with the hundreds and thousands of submissions that you read every year?
It's certainly a lot. The submissions come in through the Traveler's Tales portal and through my own outreach to my favorite travel magazines and literary journals requesting nominations. This time I got 1,600 submissions all told. And I did have a lot of help reading this time. I had an editorial assistant, which was amazing. So then they come in, and it's a process from there of sort of whittling down the yeses, the
Yeah.
maybes, the nos. And I'll often just have a huge stack of yeses, huge hundreds and hundreds of yeses and maybes. And so
Wow.
from there, deciding which story about the death of a parent,
Mm-hmm.
or which story about a post-divorce trip, or which sort of really extreme adventure story, and
Yeah.
which story from Paris and which story from Italy. And
How do you know, like, is there something inside of you that just kind of there's a chord that rings true when you read an essay or a submission that you know is going to make it in or is likely to make it in?
I think so. I think that there are certain stories that I know from the first read that it's just a slam dunk, because I'm so moved by it. It makes me cry and
Mm.
laugh and think, and it doesn't need a ton of editing. And I learn
Yeah.
something about the place or about the culture, and it just sort of has everything. So those do come in, and then I think, well, I've already got my Paris story or my Italy story, and then maybe another one will come in. I'm like, "Oh, but I really like this one
What do I
too.
do?
I can have 2
Yes.
France." Everyone likes to read about France.
That's true. That's true. I was reading a little bit about your early life, which I didn't know. We've known each other for a fairly long time at this point. But so you started writing, I believe, professionally in your early 20s, though it sounds like you've been writing since you were a kid and even started a novel or wrote a novel when you were 10. So who would you say that traveler was back then? And who would you say you are now or this year as you were sifting through those 1,600 submissions?
Yeah, first of all, I'll say that novel that I wrote when I was 10 was very bad.
You wrote a novel at 10. That's something to be celebrated in my book.
I always knew I was going to be a writer, and I studied it in college. Yeah, so my travel writing career really began when I moved to South Korea when I was
Mm.
25. I had just graduated and I had a degree in creative writing, but I was working on novels and
Yeah.
poetry. And then I just realized that the real world around me in South Korea was so much more interesting than anything I was coming up with that was fiction. And so I started writing there. And who was I then? I was young and fearless and filled with wonder. I'm still filled with wonder. I'm not young and fearless anymore. But yeah, that traveler was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
I really threw myself at the world when I lived in South Korea for 6 years, and I was just constantly jumping on airplanes and backpacking all over Asia. I had grown up without any money, and this was the first time that I had a job that allowed me any freedom to do that. And so if I had 5 days off of teaching, I was teaching ESL. I'm not sure if I mentioned that, but if I had a week off, I'd just hop over to wherever, Guam. I traveled
Amazing.
all over. I was young and single and falling in love in all kinds of different languages, and I
Yeah.
was very adventurous. And now, who am I now compared? I mean, I would say that I'd like to think I'm still adventurous, and I'm not the kind of person who says no to cultural experiences, but I'm 56 now, and some of those, daredeviling things that I did when I was young don't interest me as much anymore. I think slow travel is more my jam now.
Hmm.
I guess I'd say I look for experiences that are more spiritual or illuminating, connected, whereas I used to just love jumping out of a plane, jumping on a plane and jumping out of it.
How many times have you jumped out of a plane?
I've only jumped out of a plane once, but I did a lot of other things like that. I went
Yeah.
hang gliding off of a
Wow.
lighthouse in Australia and rappelling off of a massive mountain in Korea, and yeah, I was really into thrill, just
Yeah.
anything thrilling, and now I think I crave like a more meaningful relationship with the place. My favorite thing is really lingering in a place now and finding my favorite restaurant or my favorite neighborhood.
Yeah. It seems like that kind of makes you very uniquely suited for this role as an editor of this series because you have such a breadth of experience. So you referred to, I think in a podcast, building a volume of the series as more of a playlist. And then I interrupted that by saying that I flip to a story sometimes and read it. But what does that mean for how you shape it and some of those selections? And would you say that this year's playlist has a theme?
Yeah, I never have a theme in mind when I'm compiling the edition, but often a theme will emerge. Maybe if I had to say a theme, maybe flashes of insight. And most of the time that comes from connection. So, what is a word that means revelation or insight that arises from connection? That's the theme. I don't know.
The Germans must have one.
Yes.
We'll look it up. Well, of the 27 essays in this edition, which ones do you feel best represent that theme?
Oh, gosh. There's a really beautiful one by Ann Hood, the writer Ann Hood, who's a New York Times bestseller. And it's about going to Mexico to celebrate Day of the Dead as a way of grieving her daughter who died when she was 6. And there are a lot of really beautiful insights that come from being there and connecting with the people sort of ushering her through that experience. There's a story called Into the Wind by Laura Killingbeck, and she goes on a bicycling trip from California up through Canada. And it's really about that she's sort of fleeing her life, or not fleeing it, but leaving her past behind. She had worked as a dancer in nightclubs, and then she was working as a mascot for a zoo, and she was feeling a little like she needed a big change. And so she just takes a bike and starts bicycling. And it's really about her not only changing her relationship with her life, but with her body. And she's on her own most of the time, but then she meets up with this group of other bicyclists and they just completely change her life. So that's one that was so incredibly moving to me. I cried at the end. I'm getting a little teary thinking about it right now.
Yes. And I just love anything cycling because I like to ride my bike too. So, well, I'm curious to know if there are stories from past editions that have really stuck with you. Because, for example, your story that you wrote for Afar, the feature that you wrote several years ago, which we'll link out to in the show notes, is one that I always cite. You know, when people ask me about, like, what are the Afar features that I should start with? It just has everything. It has depth, it has humor, it's beautifully written. So, what are some of the stories that you would say from past editions that have really stuck with you in that way?
Well, first of all, thank you. That means a lot to me.
Yeah, of course. I love that story so much. Yeah.
I loved writing it and traveling for it. I will be thinking of yours. I know that going forward. You have a story in this edition, and I will definitely be thinking of yours for a long time. But from a past edition, there are so many that I still think about that just live with me. I think by now I've edited or included about 200 stories in this series, and there are so many I still think about. One that comes to mind is it's by a writer named Sandra Gale Lambert, and it's called I Am Here in This Morning Light. And it chronicles the 30 some hours before, during, and after she takes a pre-dawn solo kayaking trip through the Florida Everglades. And it's incredibly detailed in terms of preparations for the trip, calculations, making lists, and getting the canoe from her van to the water. And that probably sounds maybe tedious, except that she's wheelchair bound. And so she has to do it completely by herself. And the stakes are so high. And she can't make any missteps of leaving something behind. Like she has to figure out how to charge her wheelchair and where to leave it and what time to leave. And she has to really actively seek assistance at times, but avoid it at others because she doesn't want to bring attention to her, but she knows she needs help in certain times. And it's such an exquisite essay. And it really, I still think about it, I think, because I just think about how much I take for granted in terms of ability and travel. And I teach that essay actually frequently because I think that it's gorgeously written with really rich, evocative details of the place itself, but you're also so deeply inside this writer's psyche, and it's really moving to me.
What a gift to have these stories live inside you in that way.
It's such an honor. I have to say, I'll get weepy if I start thinking about it too much, but it's really an honor to sit with these stories and to help the writers, in many cases, shape them and bring more of the inner story out, what the stories are really, really, really about. And yeah, it's an honor.
Well, working with you on my story, it's evident that you really care, like you to the very final detail, you're so invested. And so to imagine you doing that with, more than one, hopefully not with every single one, but it's just a lot of your own energy and time that you're putting into this. So thank you again.
I can be quite opinionated as an editor. I'm not sure everyone appreciates it as much as you do.
I would much rather have an editor than not, right? And it's good to have somebody pushing back and challenging you. I think that things only get better when you have that voice. So it is a little eerie to me when you don't get notes.
Exactly, because we get into writing because we want to write well. And so
Yes,
there's always something that can be improved upon. But I will also say that I taught your essay recently.
Oh, really?
And my
Oh my
students
gosh.
loved it. Well, you do a really beautiful job of weaving all the different parts in. It's about a swimming pool in Paris where, well, you know this, but for the listeners, where
Yes,
you
please,
have
thank you.
this awakening of identity and you weave together that story so beautifully with the history of the swimming pool and your own childhood and even your grandparents' history and then the current events. And it's just so skillfully woven. And that's really an art.
That's really sweet. Thank you. And it was an honor to have a story included. And that one had been sitting in my head. I was like, there's some way that I feel like all of these things should come together for years. I mean, wasn't a recent experience. And then it was finally Catherine LaGrave at Afar who was like, hey, do you want to write something for me on afar.com? And we talked about it. And she was the one who's like, I think we should do this. So it's editors who help you sometimes figure out how to tell a story and when to tell a story. So well, what do you think that you have learned, about how women explore the world? And that's maybe too broad of a stroke to paint, but you've read so many stories from women or people who identify as women. So, yeah, what do you think you've taken away from that?
I've learned to never underestimate a woman. That's probably the main thing I've learned. I've read these stories where I'm like, how the heck did she do that? Even just that story I was just talking about. It's with determination and grit and will and passion. Anything is possible.
Yep.
And, I've learned that we all travel in really different ways and for different reasons. And I guess one common denominator is that I think at least women who write about their travels, seem to be on a growth path.
Interesting.
They're not just traveling to see the sights and have fun. most women who submit stories, at least to this series, are actively seeking some kind of transformative experience or some
Yeah.
wisdom. They want to be changed by their travels. And I'm not saying that men don't, but I don't edit men's narratives, so I'm just speaking
Yeah.
to women. But I think we women are very open to being changed by our experiences.
I do feel like at least some of the writing that I've done, it's not just the experience, but it's also then the experience of writing about it. Like I get new insights about something because I'm thinking about it maybe a little bit more deeply. Do you find that to be true as well?
100%. Absolutely. While I'm journaling, even I'm a big advocate of journal keeping. I wrote a book about keeping travel journals,
Yeah.
and
And you
there's
still
just
keep one when you
nothing.
travel.
Yeah. And there's nothing like you're writing and you're surprised by what comes out the tip of your pen or the keys if you're typing and you're like, wow, I just learned something about myself. And that's that process of writing opens, it unlocks. Traveling without writing about it, I find to be much less nourishing experience.
Do you find that it helps you remember experiences more as well?
Yeah, definitely. As I age, my memory is definitely not what it was. And
Yeah.
so it's really important for me to keep notes. I keep a few small notebooks that can fit into even a back pocket, and I make lists of things like sounds and creatures and people I meet. And so then if I'm really tired that night and I can only write a few things, I've at least got those notes, and those help me a lot. But I love crafting the essay too, beyond just journaling. I think it does help me make sense of my experiences.
Yeah. Solidifies them into something new or different or more complete, cohesive. There was one question that came up for me when I was thinking about this conversation, and that's what was it like for you coming up as a writer in the world at the time that you were starting out? Because, I came up at a time where most of the travel writers, at least the really well known ones, were men and predominantly white men. They are wonderful writers, but I didn't often see my stories or experiences reflected in print or on screen. And in the past decade or so that I've been at Afar, I've been so happy to see much more diversity in the travel space. It's been a huge focus of ours as well. So I hope we're offering a more diverse lens for our audience, but what was your experience like?
Well, I should say that coming up as a writer, I owe in large part my career to white men, my mentors. I wouldn't be here if it hadn't been for some of them who really took me under their wing and said, you have talent, and I'm going to use my power as a white man to amplify it. And so there's that. It's funny. I think a lot of those narratives are so extreme. The
Mm.
ones that we grew up reading, there are so many of them are like man versus place and the
Yeah.
conquest and the quest and like it's almost travel as an extreme life or death sport where if you're going out into the world, you have to have your grappling hooks and your spearfishing equipment and whatever. And I can't really
Grappling hook.
speak to what I mean.
Yes, totally. Yeah, absolutely.
I do wonder. I was also reading, my mom was really good about putting like stories about Amelia Earhart into my
Hmm.
hands. And one of my most memorable reads early
Yeah.
on was Beryl Markham's West with the Night.
Wow.
And um, these pilots, these female pilots, I was really impressed by them. But I do wonder if there's some correlation between those stories and the fact that at virtually every reading or event I have for this series, there's some woman in the audience during the Q&A who will raise her hand and essentially ask if it's safe to travel, especially alone.
Mm-hmm.
I just wonder if it's because so many of those narratives had the male writer being drugged or, fearing for his life, preparing to defend his life. And so we who travel and read those, we had this idea that we had to have this incredibly dramatic story in order for our words to matter.
Yes.
And then also we'd better be prepared to defend our lives.
Without a grappling hook at the ready.
It's interesting.
Yeah, I don't really know. And I think you're right, especially kind of the men who were in those positions and handed the baton and said, I want to share this platform. Like, I think there's so many of them out there. And it's wonderful to see more diverse storytelling in travel. But yeah, Nikki, our producer, and I have talked a lot about women who want to travel solo and how usually the first question they get is like, are you sure that's safe? And we've talked about wanting to help change that narrative to remind people that women can and do travel safely by themselves. I mean, all of us have traveled so much on our own and very rarely have we run into any issues. And I think often we can intuit when perhaps there's an issue afoot and it's time to make our exit.
Absolutely. I think women are sort of uniquely adept at intuiting when doing that gut check. But I often feel much safer when I'm traveling than I do, walking around in my own country. So
Yes.
I haven't really experienced. I mean, I've been, I've had documents stolen, whatever, but I've never feared for my life, and I've traveled a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so nice to hear.
Yeah. And I love that you're talking about diverse voices in travel writing, because that is such an important change that I've seen. I'm definitely seeing more women writers and more diverse writers, and it's something that's really important to me. I actively seek stories by writers from historically underrepresented communities, and I think that's something that all editors should do.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
a great many are doing now. So there is a shift happening for sure.
Yeah, there's not really, I think, an excuse in 2026. And the diversity of stories is more interesting, right? Like, you get so many different perspectives. Well, given all of that, like, why do you think a women only or anthology is so important at this moment in time in 2026?
I mean, I think it's still nice to see women being given the opportunity to take up more space in this genre that has always been male dominated. And so even if it's not entirely the case anymore that we have to, fight our way into this sphere, I think we can still make up for lost time.
Yeah.
And also right now, the truth is we are seeing women's rights being stripped away, and we're hearing politicians and public figures spewing misogyny, and podcasters doing the same thing and saying that a woman's place is in the home. So I guess in light of that, I think the more opportunities to amplify women's voices with stories of autonomy and adventure, the better.
Yeah.
The more the merrier.
Yeah. I love that. Because there's nothing like reading a story that makes you think, oh, I could do that, right? Or they did that, I could do that, or some version of that.
Exactly. And even if it's not, there are stories in here that are cautionary tales in every best women's travel writing. There's a story that makes you think, oh my gosh, I'm so glad that wasn't me. But the writer was alive to tell about it in the end. And so I think, it's equal parts inspiration and edification.
Last question for you. What would you say your advice is for women who are out there traveling the world, who want to have more autonomy, to want to spend more time on the road? What would you say to them?
Mm. So for women who are already traveling, I would say to practice the art of deeply noticing, to really immerse yourself in the experience and find ways to really absorb the places that you go. And I think that when we do that, we find more connection in those places. And the more we do that, the braver we become and the more natural travel becomes. I think that it's really become very easy these days to go traveling and sort of have our camera out constantly and not let
Mm-hmm.
a place really touch us deeply and not make a lot of connections. And so being present, really present, and not letting the online world get in between us and our experience, I think is really important. And then I think just actively looking for powerful and profound, transformative experiences that bring us inside the place instead of being on the outside recording it. Those are the things that really make us believe in travel.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%. Those are the memories that you carry with you. It's not really like, oh, I saw this wonderful iconic site. It's like I was invited into this person's home or whatever the situation may be, connected with somebody in a more real way. Those are the ones that stick with me.
That's where the magic comes.
I couldn't agree more, and it's a perfect note to end on.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lavinia. So nice to have you here.
It's so nice to be here.
The Best Women's Travel Writing Volume 13 is out now. You can find it at bookshop.org and learn more about Lavinia and her work at laviniaspalding.com. She also writes a wonderful Substack called Writing Away, which I've linked to in the show notes. We'll see you next time. If you're ready for more travel inspiration and intel like this, visit afar.com and be sure to follow us on Instagram and TikTok. We are at Afar Media. If you enjoyed today's exploration, I hope you'll come back for more great stories and interviews. Subscribing always makes that easy, and be sure to rate and review the show on your favorite podcast platform. It helps other travelers find it. This has been Unpacked, a production of Afar Media. The podcast is produced by Aislyn Greene and Nikki Galteland. This podcast is part of the Airwave Media Podcast Network. Visit airwavemedia.com to listen and subscribe to their other fine shows like Culture Kids and the Explorers Podcast.